Okay, here we are on Friday, February 11th, and we will be continuing our conversation about cultivating being fully aware with a extended focus on the importance of how we show up. In our conversation on Wednesday, it turned out that there was some confusion about what I was presenting. I simply hadn't been discerning enough in how I presented it. And I thank you all for helping me realize that. And so I went back to the drawing board, back to the process of think again, as Adam Grant encourages us to do, and came up with a little different way of dealing with all of this. And I sent that out in an email last night, and now I want to do a little screen share on it and talk about it. I just want to make sure that all of you remember that I have not completely lost my chops as a consultant in being able to explain 2x2 matrices. So here we go. How we show up matters. It really does. Our underlying attitude in any given moment, our spoken words, our actions, all have an impact, not only on ourselves, but on those around us. And we often underestimate the impact that we're having. And so given how important it is, how we show up, how much it matters, it is of value, it's of benefit to know whether we are in default mode or in intention mode. So if we look at this 2x2 set of boxes, where I want to direct your attention to begin with is on the default side. So you see the word default in the upper left corner there of those boxes. And then on the left-hand side, you see a box that's labeled feeling threatened. And then you see a box that says normal circumstances. And this is the distinction that I didn't make on Wednesday, and we got distracted naturally by these circumstances when we're triggered. And they're important circumstances, and we've spent a lot of time working with them in this practice. So I don't mean to be ignoring them or minimizing those experiences, but rather to distinguish between those times when we feel threatened versus what I'm just calling normal circumstances when we're not threatened. When we're threatened, as it says inside this box in the upper left-hand corner, that's when our sympathetic nervous system is triggered, our primitive brains. We're trying to protect ourselves. And these reactions are mostly instinctual and involuntary. And they're what Richard Rohr, in that piece that I shared later and accompanied this diagram in the email last night, calls first gaze, which is his writing there was very insightful about all of this, and I love that phrase, first gaze. But what I want to focus on here is the ways that we can show up in default mode in normal circumstances. These are these moments when we're unaware and unconscious. And that leads often to being unskillful, maybe even incompetent. And I want to share an example of this that's been going on for me of late that finally came up to me, and I saw clearly in my meditation this morning. As I mentioned on either Wednesday or last week, I have a tendency to pick out what seems to be wrong. And that's closely connected to my inclination to be responsible. Now, of course, being responsible is a healthy attribute, except when it's overcooked. And over the last few weeks, for whatever reasons, I have become hyper responsible and completely unaware that that's what I was doing. Unaware, unconscious. And I have ended up doing it in unskillful ways, too much. And it arises out of aversion or fear on my part to being perceived as irresponsible. What? One of my worst nightmares. Philip Davidson's irresponsible? No! Not that. To my craving for approval. And to my ignorance, my delusion around what's happening, not being aware of what's going on. So when aversion, craving, and ignorance dominate in our awareness, then we are in default mode of how we show up, even in normal circumstances. So intention. Intention is about shifting from being in this unaware and unconscious mode to being aware and conscious, skillful and competent, seeing clearly. What I'm now realizing as a result of the meditation was the ways that this being responsible had gone over the top and was adversely affecting situations, other people, Kay in particular, and others of you who don't even know it yet. So I'm starting to see clearly. And that then prompts me to be in a place of being more kind. This is coming from my deepest aspirations around how important it is to me to see clearly and act with kindness, to show up out of understanding of what's happening and a willingness to learn. So all of these are ingredients of intention. So we'll stop the screen share here for a moment, and I'll say a couple more things about intention. How are we doing on time? All right. Everything we do is preceded by a mental urge that we label as intention. Our thoughts, our spoken words, our actions. When we formulate an intention, when we do it intentionally, then we are pre-wiring our brains. Yesterday, I spent some time thinking about how I wanted to show up this morning. And these are the words that I wrote. Humility, vulnerable, inquiry, and sharing. And without explicitly thinking about them, I'm convinced that that pre-wiring of my brain is what led me into this understanding, this awareness during the meditation. Helped me be in this place where I'm comfortable revealing to you how that aversion, that fear of being irresponsible, has affected me of late. So when we formulate an intention, we do so consciously, with full awareness. And that intention is based upon aspiration, upon a sense of what guides us in our lives, what causes us, what leads to integrity, what we regard as integrity and unity, our deepest values. So the first step in formulating an intention is knowing what's most important to us. And as I shared with the group last night, how we choose to vote in an election, how we choose to show up in the economy, what religion we choose, those are not examples of what's most important to us. Those are manifestations of what's important to us, but they're not what's actually most important to us. What's most important to us is typically 2 or 3 levels beneath that. And so it takes some investigation, some willingness to keep saying to ourselves, what's underneath this? What's underneath this? And when we do that, then we put ourselves in a place where we've pre-wired our brains, when we show up in ways that we really care about, when we end up having the impact on ourselves and on other people that we're comfortable with, that really matters to us. Showing up as a person who is hyper-responsible does not benefit anybody, and it just makes me anxious as hell. Because what it's mostly showing me is all the ways that I'm being irresponsible. That's really what it's highlighting for me. And no matter how hard I keep trying to be responsible, it doesn't lead there, because you can't control everything. And that's where it leads for me. So let's just step right into a practice here around all of this. So beginning by settling in, perhaps taking a couple of deep breaths. I love the long, slow out breath in which I'm letting go right now. Letting go of all that tension and energy that built up in my sharing these comments and observations and all that talking. And softening a bit. And now choosing an anchor for this meditation. Your breath, the sounds that you can locate, any physical sensations. Choosing one of those as an anchor and tuning into it, being with it. Directing your attention to your anchor. And now letting go of that anchor and stepping into open-ended awareness. Being open to whatever arises, whatever thoughts, emotions, sensations. Let them all arise. the full flood of thoughts, the storm of emotions. Let them all arise. And noticing whether what's arising is pleasant, unpleasant, or neither. And choosing to come back to your anchor, directing your attention to your anchor, your breath, sounds, sensations, concentrating your attention on your anchor. And however often your attention wanders away from your anchor, simply be aware and gently guide your attention back. Let's go back now to the open awareness, to simply allowing whatever thoughts want to arise, or emotions, or sensations. Just letting them all come. Opening the door to everybody, to anything. This is a kind of default mode. And we'll come back to directing our attention to our anchor. And taking a moment now to notice the difference between being in open awareness in default mode and directing your attention to your anchor. And noticing the difference without judgment, just being an observer, a scientist. And in closing, offering yourself a word or two of kindness for your willingness to engage in these experiences. So the reflection question this morning will be about sharing your experience and noting the difference between being in this place of open awareness, allowing whatever is coming up inside you to show up, ways that was pleasant, unpleasant, or neither, and what it was like to be with an anchor, directing your attention. Noticing the differences between directing your attention to your anchor and being in open awareness. And again, a little silence and listening carefully for the insights that others have to offer.